Part 2. Over the next coming months, I'll be working closely with the Carnegie team that is working on the future of civil society in UK and Ireland, specifically focusing on marginalization of dissent and looking at what that means within the context of the UK and Ireland in itself, but also looking at what impact that has had globally and looking at how we can reverse some of the negative interventions that we have seen that has legitimized detention without trial, invasion of privacy, and so on, but also actions that have particularly had an impact on certain minority immigrant communities as well. In the coming months, I'll also be looking at the bigger questions of our civil society can play its full role, not simply as cheap labor and deliverers of services and contractors to various governments, but as agents of public policy, as organizations, and as energy that can infuse and help our governments make better policy to start with, and to create the context for meaningful dialogue between civil society and governments, whether they be in the UK or whether they be in South Africa. It is critically important that in the coming decade we create a context where we recapture the space that has been lost and the promise of the importance of civil society that has been undermined. In conclusion, I would say that if we want to create a world where democracy is alive and well, where we can address economic justice, social justice, and political justice, we need to ensure that we are creating societies where citizens have ample freedom of association, assembly, and expression. When this does not exist, democracy suffers, and all the other things that people care about, like jobs, like water, like the climate change, and so on, all those agendas also suffer. So in the work that I'll be doing with Carnegie, I will be trying to look at not only the promise of civil society, but also some of the challenges that civil society faces internally, and to address those questions in a way in which hopefully we can create a world in which the role of organized citizens is as important for democracy as elections evidently are. Thank you very much. Hello, my name is Kumi Naidu. I'm the Honorary President of Civicus World Alliance for Citizen Participation and the co-chair of the Global Call to Action Against Poverty. I'm also serving on the International Advisory Group of the Carnegie Trust's inquiry into the future of civil society. Civil liberties is critically important and fundamentally linked to the very idea of democracy. Democracy should not be reduced to the singular act of casting a ballot once every 4 or 5 years. To do this undermines the idea that the actions of ordinary citizens in between election periods can bring value to the idea of an active public life and a meaningful participatory democracy. Sadly, in too many countries around the world, with the advent of the so-called ill-named war on terror, we have seen a fundamental undermining of democracy and particularly civil liberties. When we work in Zimbabwe, for example, and have confronted the Zimbabwean government for their human rights violations, they have often pointed out to the actions of countries like the United Kingdom and the United States who have engaged in gross violations of civil liberties and human rights over the last several years. They point out that they don't do extraordinary rendition, they are not running Guantanamo Bay, they were not engaged in Abu Ghraib, and so on. The bottom line is the decline of civil liberties in countries that are supposed to be promoters of democracy has actually undermined civil liberties quite considerably in countries where democracy is still emerging. Civil society associations, these are umbrella bodies of NGOs and other civil society groups, are critically important to defend and advance civil liberties. But right now, the work, for example, of the Carnegie Trust looking at the marginalization of dissent is critically important for us to be able to reverse much of the damage that has been done in the name of the war on terror over the last 7 years or so. And it is critically important that we begin to understand marginalization of dissent, how this has chilled civic life, and how it has undermined the idea of public participation. If democracy is to prosper, if human rights is to prosper, if social development is to prosper, all of this requires a celebration of civil liberties, a deepening of civil liberties, and creating a context where citizens can participate actively in public life, not simply be reduced to consumers or to voters. Thank you very much.